This podcast is intended for a mature audience. Listener discretion is advised. Welcome back to Legend of the Bones. Following in the footsteps of giants, Legend of the Bones is a chimera. A mix of old-school tabletop RPG and dark fantasy storytelling. As its name might suggest, in Legend of the Bones the dice rule. There'll be no rerolls, no fudging the dice, no metacurrency. The roll of the bones will determine the character's destiny, and no one will be spared their fate. None shall escape the destiny of bone. Last time on Legend of the Bones. Having come upon the village of Lost Withel during their journey upriver, and found the settlement to have been attacked and burned by brigands, the companions learned from one of the survivors, a woodsman named Abron, that his sister, Morwenna, had been abducted during the raid by the outlaw leader, a man named Roscallon. With Abron's help, the companions tracked the outlaws to a ruined hunting lodge deep in the forest, and here they captured one of the outlaws after they emerged from the lair to relieve themselves. The outlaw steadfastly refused to divulge any information which would aid the companions, and so leaving him bound and under the guard of Canute's crewmen, the companions moved into the ruins of the hunting lodge, discovering a trapdoor leading to cellars. Here they killed another outlaw, clearly posted as a guard, before moving down a corridor. Canute triggered a trap and was injured by a huge axe which swung from the ceiling, but with no spells or miracles available which could help, there was nothing else to do but press on. However, the next chamber had been used as a kennel. The companions disturbed an enormous direwolf. The creature immediately became aggressive, and breaking free from its chains, lunged forward in attack. Chapter 51, Part 1, Day 51, Night. Party status: Beric, 43 out of 43 hit points. Lena, 31 out of 31 hit points. Valen, 19 out of 19 hit points. Talion, 24 out of 24 hit points. Canute, 26 out of 31 hit points. Arn, 24 out of 24 hit points. Abron, 21 out of 21 hit points. Spells available: Valen has memorized Push, Shield, Revive, Clairvoyance, and Ignite. Talion has memorized Resolve, Poetic Prose, Pitch, and Imbue. Lena can pray for 2 second level miracles and 1 third level miracle. The putrid stench of the direwolf's breath assaulted Beric's nose and throat, making him gag as he reeled back from the lunging beast. Moments earlier, its huge jaws had snapped just inches from his face. How it had not torn his flesh was a miracle, but Beric had no time to ponder his luck. He raised his shield and staggered backward into the corridor, the beast's snarls growing louder and more menacing. The others were already retreating towards the previous chamber, where they could surround the creature. But in the narrow passageway, Beric knew that he would face the beast alone. He had encountered direwolves before, during the goblin raid that had destroyed his home. It had been a wolf rider who had cut him down and left him for dead. As the echo of that fateful night resurfaced, the scar running down his face tingled with a strange nerve memory. Beric pushed the thought aside, knowing that he needed his wits about him. The direwolf's hind legs compressed, muscles coiling in preparation for an attack. Its amber eyes gleamed with predatory intelligence, locking onto its prey. Beric's mouth was parched, and his heart pounded in his chest. But the vision of his Aunt Brona lying dead in the dirt, her throat ripped out by such a beast, hardened his resolve. he tightened his grip on the hilt of Callous Cledder. With a bestial snarl, the direwolf suddenly lunged forward, its jaws wide and claws extended, ready to tear him apart. Entering combat. Okay, so given the narrowness of the corridor, initially at least, this combat will be a one-on-one fight between the direwolf and Beric. Direwolves are 4+1 hit dice monsters with an ascending armor class of 13. Their single bite attack is made at a +4 to hit and delivers 2d4 points of damage. Time to roll the direwolf's hit points. A total of 19. Okay, so that's bang on the half min out. On paper, Beric is the stronger combatant, but as always, you never know what the dice are going to decide. Okay then, let's get to it. Round 1. I'm going to rule that the direwolf is not surprised. After all, the party made quite a bit of noise prior to opening the door. But let's see if Beric is. A roll of 1 or 2 will mean that the big man is surprised. A 2! Oh, that is bad luck. Beric's distraction at the memory of his past will allow the direwolf a free attack. With its attack bonus, the direwolf will need an 11 or more. A 2. Luckily for Beric, the beast cannot get past his shield. Round 2. Initiative. The direwolf. A 2. Beric. A 5. Okay, so Beric will make a fighting withdrawal, aiming to lure the creature into the previous chamber, where the others will be able to join the fight. The basic expert rules state that during a fighting withdrawal, a character may move half its encounter movement rate, meaning that Beric will take another 2 rounds to make it to the chamber. With that established, Beric strikes out, needing a 9 or more to hit. A 13 for a total of... Wow! 10 points of damage! The warrior pushes the direwolf back with his shield and slashes with his sword. The animal, still reared up on its hind legs, takes the blow on its underbelly. It yelps in pain as the blade bites deep into its flesh. Okay, Beric's strike has taken the direwolf below half its maximum hit points. So on that basis, I'm going to make a morale test. The direwolf will need to roll equal or lower than its morale of 8 to continue the fight. A 6. The beast has clearly been trained for battle. With a snarl, it lunges at Beric. But with a 3, in the narrow confines of the corridor, it once again cannot get past the warrior's shield. Round 3. Initiative. The direwolf. 2. Beric. 3. Strengthening his defensive stance, Beric makes an attack before withdrawing further down the corridor. A 12 is a hit for a total of 6 points of damage. The warrior thrusts Callous Cledder from behind his shield. The blade rakes across the beast's ribs. The direwolf, enraged by its wounds, leaps forward again. But a 7 means that Beric easily pushes the animal back with his shield before stepping back into the previous chamber, where the companions wait with their weapons at the ready. The direwolf is badly injured and will now be surrounded on 3 sides, so the next round could well be the last. Round 4. Initiative. The direwolf. A 3. The party. A 4. Now with more room to maneuver, Beric swings his sword, trying to deliver the killing blow. But with a 5, the wolf steps back at the last moment and Beric's blade cuts through air. Canute, standing to the left of the direwolf, is able to attack for the first time. The Skarne warrior needs a 9 or more. A 19 for a total of 6 points of damage. Canute hacks down with his sword. The strike connects with the direwolf's neck. There is a spray of blood as the blade bites deep, almost severing the animal's head. Its huge form slumps lifelessly to the ground, its grey fur stained and matted with blood. Well, I had expected that encounter to prove far more challenging than it actually turned out to be. But as always, you never know how the dice are going to fall. Now before I go any further, this is a level up episode for both Canute and Talion. So without any ado, Let's level up Canute. Rolling a d8 for new hit points. A 1. Oh, that is disappointing. But with a half min out and his constitution bonus, Canute's maximum hit points rise to 36. Let's see if he can do any better with ability score increases. Strength 1. Intelligence 2. Wisdom 4. Dexterity. A 6! Canute's dexterity increases to 14. No additional bonus though. Constitution. Another 6! Canute's constitution increases to 15. Very impressive, although once again no additional bonus. And finally, charisma. A 4. Well, after a disappointing start, that turned out to be a good level up for the Skarne warlord. Let's see if Talion has as much luck. Rolling a d6 for new hit points. A 2. Well, with a half min out, Talion's hit point total increases to 27. Now for ability score increases. Strength 3. Intelligence 2. Wisdom 3. Talion's dexterity cannot increase further, so let's move on to Constitution. A 6! Talion's Constitution increases to 10. And Charisma. A 1. Well, that was a modest level up, but it doesn't stop there, because Talion now gets access to another second level bard spell. There are 4 possible spells available at this level. Rolling a d4 to see what our bard has learnt. A 1. Let's see. Okay, well this will be very useful. Talion has unlocked the melody for the spell Lullaby. On invoking this spell, the bard's words and music soothes any human, demi-human or animal, but not unnatural monsters, within a 30-foot radius, sending them to sleep. The sleep can be interrupted, but if uninterrupted, upon waking, those affected regain 1d4 hit points in addition to any natural healing. The bard themselves is unaffected and cannot benefit. Targets may try to resist the effects and can stay awake if they pass save versus spell. Of course, Talion will not get access to this spell until after he next sleeps. Whilst I'm here behind the screen, I need to make a perception check against one of the character's wisdom. If successful, the purpose of the check will be revealed in the narrative. I think I'm going to choose Valen, for no other reason than it feels most appropriate in this situation. Valen needs to roll equal or less than his wisdom of 11 to succeed. A 4. Okay, with that done, it's time to get back to the story. Chapter 51, Part 2, Day 51, Night. Party status: Beric, 43 out of 43 hit points. Lena, 31 out of 31 hit points. Valen, 19 out of 19 hit points. Talion, 27 out of 27 hit points. Canute, 29 out of 36 hit points. Arn, 24 out of 24 hit points. Abron, 21 out of 21 hit points. Spells available: Valen has memorized Push, Shield, Revive, Clairvoyance, and Ignite. Talion has memorized Resolve, Poetic Prose, Pitch, and Imbue. Lena can pray for 2 second level miracles and 1 third level miracle. In the cramped, dimly lit confines of the underground chamber, the companions gathered around the blood-soaked corpse of the direwolf, their faces bearing expressions of disbelief, and for several minutes no one spoke. Such beasts were rare, so rare in fact that only Beric and Canute had previously encountered them. While it was known that goblins sometimes trained direwolves as mounts, the idea of these formidable creatures being kept and raised by humans was practically unheard of. The direwolf was an enormous beast, far too large to be kept solely as a guard dog in such a place. The ferocity with which it had attacked on sight suggested it had either been trained to do so, or that part of its nature remained untamed and feral. Moreover, the location of the kennel seemed odd. The outlaws would have to continually pass through the chamber to access the rest of the underground complex, making the placement highly impractical.
Why would anyone keep such a beast down here?
Canute muttered, finally breaking the silence.
And why force themselves to continually pass through the kennel?
Beric added.
Maybe they do not,
Valen suggested, his voice thoughtful as he pondered the riddle.
Perhaps there is a hidden passageway.
Moving back towards the kennel, the mage began tracing his fingers along the cold, rough stones that made up the walls of the corridor. The companions followed closely, their eyes scanning in the gloomy surroundings. After a few tense minutes, Valen's fingers found a fourth section of wall.
See here,
the mage indicated, and the others could indeed make out the faint outline of a narrow door. Then he pointed to a small circular stone that looked slightly out of place, but could easily have been missed in the low light.
I believe this stone is the handle. It has no mortar around it, and it looks as if it could be twisted,
Valen explained, his voice steady.
Good work,
Beric praised, stepping forward to take the lead. Placing his calloused hand upon the cold stone, the warrior turned it to the left. With a soft, almost reluctant creak, the door swung open, revealing its true nature. The door had been cleverly concealed by a thin veneer of meticulously cut stone, seamlessly cemented onto sturdy wooden panels. Beyond the threshold lay a narrow, dark passage that stretched 10 feet before ending at another door, shrouded in shadows. Beric hesitated, his instincts telling him to pause. The hairs on the back of his neck stood on end, and a chill ran down his spine. Something was undeniably amiss. This place, the trap, the direwolf, it all felt wrong. These were supposed to be common brigands, yet everything about this place felt too orchestrated, too deliberate. He couldn't quite put his finger on it, but the unease gnawed at him. He almost voiced his concerns, but decided against it. Rightly or wrongly, the others naturally looked to him for guidance, and he needed to appear resolute. With the moonstone casting its pale white glow, Beric stilled himself and led the companions into the passage. They squeezed through, one by one, the tunnel's cool, damp air clinging to their skin. The musty scent of mould and the faint odour of animals lingered in the air. Once again, at the next door, Beric pressed his ear to the oak planks, listening intently for any sounds beyond.
Hear you anything?
Canute whispered.
No, but that means nothing,
Beric replied grimly, his voice barely audible. Straightening up, he turned to catch Valen's eye.
Can you see beyond?
He asked, knowing that the simplicity of his question belied the mysteries of Valen's craft.
As you did, in Angrak.
Whilst from a story perspective, it may feel a little tired to return to a device that has already been used. From a game aspect, it makes sense that a group of adventurers would reuse the capabilities they have to gain an advantage. So having already faced an unexpected threat, and been unable to detect any sound on the other side of the door, Beric has asked Valen if he could use his clairvoyance spell to see whether anyone lurks in the chamber beyond. To answer that question, the mage will need to roll a 17 or less for his casting roll. A 2. Okay, so with that success, I need to determine who, if anyone, is in the room. There are 6 other outlaws in the gang, plus their leader, Roscallan. The room itself is the main cellar, which is used for storage as well as being the living area for the outlaws, although Roscallon himself has a separate chamber. I'm going to ask the Oracle if all the outlaws are present. A 3. That's a no but. Okay, so I'm going to interpret that as Roscallon will not be there, at least initially. It may well be nighttime, but the companion's fight with the direwolf will certainly have alerted the outlaws to the prospect of intruders, so I'm going to rule that none will be asleep. Now, back in episode 50, a roll on the Oracle determined that there was something unusual about these outlaws. The question then is whether this will be revealed during Valen's spell. Let's ask the Oracle again. A 6. That's a yes and. Right, time to find out what happens. Chapter 51, Part 3, Day 51, Night. Party status. The party status is unchanged, except that Valen has cast Clairvoyance.
Doduid illigate obech.
As vision slowly returned to Valen's eyes, he began to take in his surroundings. He, or whomever's eyes he saw through, was in a large chamber, perhaps 40 by 20 feet, softly lit by a single flickering wall sconce. The walls were made from the same rough-cut stones, their surfaces uneven, and no doubt cold to the touch. Once again, the floor was nothing more than compacted earth, though here filthy rushes had been scattered about, clearly an attempt to provide some insulation against the pervasive chill. Set into one of the long walls were 2 doorways, which Valen supposed led to the kennel and the passage in which he and his friends stood, while opposite, a single door presumably led further into the complex. As his host moved about, Valen could make out that at one end of the room, various sacks and barrels were piled up, indicating that this was where the outlaws kept their supplies. The rest of the chamber served as living quarters. Half a dozen bedrolls lay haphazardly on the floor along the walls, and to one side was a crude table and mismatched chairs. Upon the table was the picked carcass of a roasted boar, its bones gleaming dully in the dim light. In the faint illumination, what little colour there was in the room appeared dull and muted, obscured by flickering shadows. The effect was so pronounced that Valen wondered if the person through whose eyes he saw was colourblind. There were 5 other men in the room, all talking animatedly to each other, though Valen supposed in hushed tones, given that Beric had not heard them. They seemed to be debating some course of action, until they appeared to come to an accord, and one of them left through the single door. The remaining men, including Valen's host, bizarrely began to remove their clothing, flinging their breeches and tunics to one side, until they stood naked in a circle. Each of their bodies were tattooed with runes and swirling patterns, and all bore multiple scars of old wounds, seemingly made by the teeth and claws of some beast. The mage knew he should end the spell and sever the connection, but some morbid curiosity over the strange ritual taking place held him back. At that moment, the door through which the other man had left a few minutes earlier opened, and he returned, accompanied by a 7th man who was stripped to the waist. He was handsome, tall and muscular, with dark shaggy hair and thick eyebrows which met in the middle. That must be Roscallon, Valen thought. In his hands, Roscallon held a clay jar, and after the returning man had stripped and joined the circle, the outlaw leader moved inside the ring. He approached each man in turn, and using his finger, scooped some paste of blue woad from the jar, and painted an arrow downwards from their forehead, over their nose, and ending at their chin. This was followed by a daub on each eyelid. Eventually, Roscallon reached Valen's host. There was something cruel and feral about his dark eyes, that if the mage had been in his own body, would have made him shudder. Who knew what depravity this man had subjected Morwenna to. He suddenly felt terribly afraid for Lena. He needed to return. Everything went dark, presumably as his host received the woad on his eyelids. A moment later, his eyes flickered back open. Only now his surroundings were not obscured by darkness and muted colour. Instead he saw the world quite clearly, in perfect shades of grey. All about him, the other men were thumping their chests with their fists, their eyes burning with preternatural light. Roscallon stepped back into the centre of the ring. He unfastened the drawstring of his breeches and let them fall to the floor, and taking a handful of the woad, smeared it over his face. He dropped the clay jar, which broke on the rush-covered floor, as his body started to convulse, apparently uncontrollably. All the other men experienced likewise. Roscallon's muscles bulged and stretched, his bones seemingly cracked and reshaped, as his limbs elongated, his face contorting with pain. Valen's view was turned away, as his host seemingly began to undergo the same awful transformation. Only glimpses followed, as his host looked down upon his own extended arms. Thick, coarse fur began to sprout from his skin, while his fingers elongated into razor-sharp claws. Mesmerised and horrified in equal amounts, Valen looked on as a snout began to protrude from his host's face. Then everything was still, as Valen looked upon 7 abominations. Valen gasped. He was dizzy and nauseated, and for an instant it felt as if he had woken from a terrible dream. But the nightmare was all too real, and the panic rose up in him as he desperately looked around at his companions.
We must go.
Thank you for listening to Legend of the Bones. I hope you've enjoyed the show. If you like what you've heard, then please consider rating and reviewing the show in your podcatcher of choice. Not only do I love seeing the feedback, but it really does help the show to reach new listeners. As always, where would I be without my amazing cast of voice talent? Just one person to thank in this episode. Returning once again in the role of Canute is Jon Cohen, the creator of Tale of the Manticore. Thanks Jon, you always deliver. I am, as always, incredibly grateful. You can also help by liking or reposting new episode announcements, or by recommending the show online or to a friend. You really can't beat the power of word of mouth. Alternatively, if you'd like to show your appreciation by buying me a metaphorical cup of tea, then I have a Ko-fi page at ko-fi.com/Legend of the Bones. Any donations will go towards the show's running costs. If you're interested, I also have a range of merchandise, which can be found at www.redbubble.com/people/legendbones/shop. To keep the cost down to you, all items are presented at zero markup. I make no money from them. It's purely to give something back to fans of the show. I would also love to know what you think of the show, and I do respond to every message I receive. So with that in mind, you can contact me on X at LegendBones, Blue Sky at LegendBones, Mastodon at legendbones@ttrpg-hangout.social, Instagram at legendofthebones, email at legendofthebones@gmail.com, or go to legendofthebones.blogspot.com for show notes, house rules, character profiles, art, maps and more. Join me next time to find out what awaits our adventurers as the bones decide their fate. None shall escape the destiny of Bone.
Hello, I'm Maddie Searle, the host of A Game of One's Own, an actual play podcast from Snazzy Tapir Productions. This show is all about telling stories using solo and duet role-playing games. Expect an eclectic mix of science fiction tales, fantasy fables, and horror stories based on games from the most innovative indie designers, with a few special guests along the way. Let's tell some weird stories. You can subscribe to the show wherever you listen to podcasts, follow us on Blue Sky and Instagram at A Game of One's Own, or find us on our website at snazzytapir.com.